And good hello once again. This is LC Lupus with another of these Utopian project video things. This is the 7th video so far. It is recommended to go back and listen to the other ones to actually get the full picture here because they are all quite specific. So essentially, this is all a series about utopian ideas and a possible utopian idea of society, how we might be able to structure things to make it just a lot better for the people who are actually alive and have to live through the society that exists. So it's preferable for that society to be a good one. So anyway, today's video is about health, diet, and medicine. So healthcare, essentially, when it comes to society at large. So remember, this is a very, very communal-oriented utopian system. It's not so much built on any kind of individualistic values necessarily. It's built on the idea that everybody should be working together and trying to help each other and etc., and those kinds of, hopefully good things. We can only hope, right? So a society like this, which is also a cashless society, would be one that doesn't do medicine the way we do it now. So when we think of healthcare, much of the time now, healthcare is a thing that you do or a place that you go to a doctor, whatever, when there is a problem. That's when you go to the doctor, because healthcare is reactive. It is about fixing what is currently broken, trying to fix it like that. Whereas what we want to instead focus on is proactive healthcare. Not so much about fixing what is wrong, but stopping things from breaking in the first place. Now, I remember hearing once from someone who believes in homeopathy, which I do not believe in homeopathy. But the person who believes in homeopathy said that they prefer taking their child to a homeopath because the homeopath actually looks at everything and not just the problem. They try to sort of see what all is wrong and what all could be improved, and etc., which a lot of doctors don't do. And that is one area which I would say I agree. Most of the time you go to a doctor, the doctor will just look at the specific problem that you have and then move on. You get very, very slight proactive things that you sometimes find in some health systems. So, for instance, in the South African health system, the public health system, I've gone there many, many times. And what will happen is when you go in for just a checkup, whatever, they first force you to go and basically have your blood pressure checked. And you also get a little jab. I think, if I'm remembering correctly, you get a little jab so that they can also just check you for some things. Yeah, they want to just make sure of those basic few little vital parts, And that's good because then they could spot whether you have increased blood pressure, decreased blood pressure, anything like that. Now that's very, very minimal, but that is the kind of thing I'm talking about, where you should actually be going quite regularly, not just when you feel sick. You should be having checkups, right? If you've been to a dentist, you know that a dentist says you should come to the dentist like once every 6 months or so for a checkup, just to see if your teeth are doing okay, if they're fine. It doesn't mean fillings, whatever. That is where they can spot these things before they get too much of a problem. Because if they can spot something and go, oh, look, this is the beginnings of a problem, we're going to do a filling. Perfect. Now, if you'd left it and you just ignored it for 3 years, you would then eventually have your tooth would crack open or something like that, and a filling would no longer help, and instead you would have to have something like a root canal or an extraction. Now that's actually what happened to me. I didn't go to a dentist for the first 25 years of my life because dentistry is expensive. So and I was always told that my teeth were fine. And then one day I was eating food and half my tooth broke off. Went to the dentist, and the dentist was like, yeah, this needs to be pulled out now. There's no saving this. This is done. And they pulled out 2 teeth, and the next time they pulled out a 3rd tooth. And that's because I didn't have any kind of proactive dentistry. I now simply do not have 3 teeth in the back of my mouth. 3 molars, they're just gone. And that's great, because I couldn't afford to go to a dentist, so that was never a problem. In this society, you would have a much more proactive healthcare with frequent checkups to actually look for what is wrong, or what could be wrong, and also to test all sorts of things, having your blood tested, urine tested, all these kind of things. You can pick up all sorts of things if you just do some tests, some basic tests. Obviously, they can't exactly, when something bad comes along, like a proper virus or a cancer or something, that usually won't be detected as quickly. But if you're taught in the society that as soon as you're feeling bad, definitely go to a doctor. Like, if you're feeling bad, go to a doctor. That will be good. And of course, I did mention homeopathy earlier. This should be based on real medicine, proper, researched, modernized medicine. Because there wouldn't be a profit incentive like there is in the current system, medicine is not something you pay for. And real medicine is not something you pay for. So if you get cancer, you get treatment. And now, also, when I said real medicine, people who believe in homeopathy and stuff find it very disparaging when you talk about it as not being real medicine. And now there are certain benefits to some herbal remedies and such. I wouldn't say there's absolutely none. For instance, there is a really, really good, I don't know if it's in other countries, but it's a product in South Africa called Linktagon. And Linktagon is a sort of herbal, homeopathic, I suppose then, thing that is for, when you have like a flu or something, and it sort of has like vitamin C and all sorts of things in it that can help. That is good. It doesn't mean that, and I think also you can use, if you have toothache, you can use things like cloves and stuff to minimize the pain. There are certainly natural things that have very, very real effects. I mean, that's what medicine basically has been for most of human existence. It was herbal in nature, and only in the last few, century and a couple decades have we been really synthesizing these things. Like, aspirin once upon a time was from the bark of a willow tree, and now we synthesize aspirin, which, just as a quick aside, for the people who do believe in homeopathy and stuff, and they say, you see, there's the problem. They now synthesize the aspirin instead of getting it from the natural source. The natural source is actually not very great for you. It causes a lot of stomach problems. Modern aspirin doesn't really do that, because we actually fixed a lot of those problems by synthesizing it. Because the problem with taking something from nature is that if nature has some, amazing little aspect nestled in there somewhere amongst its things, it won't necessarily be the only thing it does. When you synthesize, you can isolate the thing that causes the good and remove all the other stuff as much as possible. Obviously, it's not a perfect system, but it is better than just taking some random, stuff. Now, real medicine, a lot of checkups, and very proactive. That is good. However, one of the problems is that human beings, they do sometimes lie about their medical existence, because there is such a thing as a social desirability bias, in which people don't want to talk about the certain things that kind of are things you don't want to talk about. When you're asked in a direct interview, so you're directly asked face to face about certain things like your eating habits or say your sexual habits, a lot of people don't want to tell the truth. Like, if you eat terrible food, you don't want to be like, yeah, I just eat pasta for breakfast, lunch, and supper. Yeah, pasta with butter. You don't want to tell people that. That's embarrassing, and that's like, you don't want to admit that that's reality. Also the same with sexual things. Sexual things are another area which people often don't like telling the truth, because depending on who you are and the societal expectations that have been placed on you, you might want to say that you have more or less sexual activity. A lot of the time, men are encouraged to be like, oh yeah, I've had so many partners. I've had just every week I'm having sex with like at least 20 women. Yeah. That is a thing that some people are sort of in terms of masculinity are pushed towards. That's how you're supposed to be. And then in terms of like women are often encouraged to act as if, oh no, I've no, I was a virgin before I met you. It's society has expectations on you, and people don't want to say something that would see them as being negative in that sense. So, and then also of course there's just the fact that people forget these things, and also say if you were a child when something happened to you, that's also a problem. So, one of the big issues is that people don't really know their medical histories that well. So, as part of your, say, identification number should be tied to a healthcare tracking sort of system. So when you go to the doctor, they can tell the last time you went to the doctor, even if it's in a different city, different town, whatever. You have the same ID. So they can track you and they can say, well, these are the things you've had in the past. We can tell what issues you've had, what allergies you have, blah, 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 blah. Doctors will always have the full information that they need to help you. Now, of course, a more libertarian person will say, I don't want doctors to have some kind of tracking to know, what diseases I've had. How dare you try and cure me of diseases? Yeah, from a libertarian perspective, perhaps it wouldn't be great for there to be any kind of healthcare tracking, but you know what the government does already track you in many, many ways. And it would be preferable for that tracking to be used in a healthy and nice way. For instance, with the COVID-19 pandemic, some countries had much more robust tracking software that actually tracked people and would be able to tell whether or not somebody was sick. And if you were sick, you had to be separated. That is what this kind of tracking could also do. If you're contagious, you should not be allowed to be in contact with other people until you're no longer contagious. That is just obvious. It's extremely obvious. Like you might say, oh, it's against my personal liberty to not let me infect other people. Well, too bad. Because you shouldn't be allowed to infect other people. I'm sorry. So, tracking. Next thing I want to get into is diet. Now, the thing is, diet and exercise and such is a big problem in our current society. Because when you look at a lot of dieting and what have you, it is very fatphobic. It's fatphobic. It acts as if being thin automatically means healthy. That is not true. Now, when I use the word diet, I don't mean a thing to make you lose weight. I mean a healthy diet, eating properly, eating healthily to make sure that you get the full nutrients that you require and that you do not get too much of essentially the bad foods. Now, in this society, as we've spoken about, food is often prepared by like public eateries, obviously, or communal eateries. If you decide to eat food by yourself, that's also fine. But this kind of tracking will be able to tell whether or not it is actually a problem. And of course, when doctors are taught, they should be taught about the realities of diet science, not that, fat equals unhealthy, because that is not necessarily the case. There are instances in which that is not true, many instances. But in this case, it will be an integration of health and diet. So, another, of course, thing that a lot of, I don't want to swear in this series, so a lot of jerks, often on the conservative side of political perspective, will like to be very, very fat-phobic and also act as if it's the fault of these gosh darn poors eating so terribly, and that's why they're so, fat. Now, in South Africa, the majority of the population is black. Obviously, it's an African country. I think black people make up like 80% of the population, or somewhere between 70 and 80%. And then there's white people, and then colored people. And also, just as a quick preemptive, in South Africa, the term colored is a racial designation that still exists. There are people who disagree with that term, but it is literally on our bank forms. So it's not like it's a, openly discriminatory word. It's not the N word, or as in South Africa, you get the K word. It's not openly discriminatory in that sense, but some people do not like the term colored, so I want to just bring that up. But anyway, so the majority of our population is obviously black, of various different, and also it's wrong to just say black. There's so many different, essentially subsets of African culture. So Zulus and Xhosa. Now also I'm pronouncing Xhosa wrong because I'm really bad at the click, and I don't want to do it wrong. But I think that it's Xhosa. I'm bad at clicking. So anyway, let's just move on. So majority of people in this country are black, obviously. Now, when you look at many, many black people in this country, they are predominantly poor because society is terrible and it's very, very unequal. Okay. Now, you would think then, say when you look at images, when people from other countries look at images of Africa and all these starving, emaciated people, when you come to South Africa, you don't really get these starving, emaciated people. Instead, a lot of the poor people are very, very big. They're fat. What you would be classified as fat, and often what would be classified as obese as well. They're very, very big. And you might immediately say, oh, well, they must be because, they're eating too much food. But then immediately we would say, well, what? Wouldn't poor people have less money for such things? And this is where you get certain bad people who will be both a combination of racist and fatphobic by saying, oh no, you see these poor black people obviously spending all their money on food and stuff, and that's why they're so fat. Sorry about my throat. So that is just completely wrong. The reason is because their diets are so terrible, because what can you afford when you're poor? Quite simple. You buy things like Millipap. Pap is... for international people, pap is like a kind of like a cereal-y, kind of rice-y, depending on the type of pap, but it can be this, it's sort of like it's a carb. It's a very heavy carb. And it's very, very cheap. It's basically like a cereal. And if you're eating that every day, you're gonna pick up weight. Like, that is not, it's very cheap. That's the thing, it's cheap. They're not able to afford healthy food. Do you know how expensive health food is? Like vegetables and stuff. It's expensive to actually eat healthy. To replace your carbs with carbs that are basically less carby. Are you going to buy pap, which is very cheap? Like, when I say cheap, I mean you buy like these huge, like 5 kilogram bags. I don't know what that is. Like, think of it. It's like the size of your torso kind of thing. It's a huge bag of pap. That will cost like, the equivalent of like, let's say if you were in meat terms, you'd be like, oh, you could either buy a huge bag of 5 kilograms. And your average human says is like, I don't know, 80 kilograms or something. So 5 kilograms is not an insignificant amount of food. Like, you often have to pick that up with like 2 hands kind of thing. You could pick it up with 1 hand, obviously, but you know what I mean. It's a heavy bag of food. That is cheap. Or you could buy, like, in terms of meat, 1 packet of like ribs. So either you buy this really cheap food that will last you like a month or whatever, or you buy this one thing that'll last you 1 meal. Now, obviously, the one is much healthier than the other. So, poor people are obviously going to go for the cheapest possible option because they don't have this thing, what's it called again, money. The unhealthiest food is the cheapest food. So those health people who are like, oh, you just need to eat more vegetables, they're just classist because they don't actually realize how expensive fruit and veg is in comparison to those kind of things. When I said earlier that little cutesy example about, eating pasta every day, I used to do that. I used to eat 0.5 kilogram of pasta every day because it's cheap. You can buy pasta for like 13 rand. 13 rand is less than $1. So I would be spending less than $1 a day on my nutrition. That's what I would eat. And what I would do is I would melt margarine and I would put salt in it. That is what I would eat because I did not have the money to do otherwise. That is really, really bad, unhealthy food. But that is how you're often forced to eat when you don't have money. And when you don't have money and you eat that kind of food, you get fatter. That is just what happens. So there's a lot of classism built up into fat phobia. It isn't, believe it or not, rich classist people. Poor people are not fatter than you because they're just unhealthy and whatever. It's because it's the cheapest food available. So that is something to take into account. With a cashless society, everyone will be able to eat properly. So you will actually see people's diets improving drastically and becoming much, much more healthy. But anyway, let's move on from diet stuff. Now, the next kind of thing I wanted to talk about is specialist stuff. Okay, how would you deal with that? This is a communal little thing. Yes, you need like a GP, you need a general practitioner, a regular doctor in your town, but you don't need like a cardiologist. Like that doesn't happen. That's why cardiologists tend to be in cities, because, you know, you have to get to these places. Now, I would say people like cardiologists and dentistry and all those kind of things should actually be much more nomadic in nature. They should essentially move around, both when they're called out and also just for checkups. So they go to different towns and such. And if there's a major problem, then that person needs to be sent somewhere where they can be sorted out. So you'll be like, okay, there's like a dedicated dentistry center in this other town. You're going to go there. I've checked you and I know that you need fillings. I know you need whatever. This is exactly what you need. You're going to take it there and you're going to get it done. That's how it should work, where you don't need this dedicated. And also, of course, specialists don't cost any more because no one costs anything. So going to a dentist, going to a cardiologist, going to a neurologist, going to a psychologist, all of these are their own, specialities, and they're all exactly the same. You will be treated the same no matter what. Fun. Perfect. So, I've already spoken about how food can be designed to be healthy. That's actually a very important thing. Spoke about in one of the previous videos, I think the second video, that a proper utopian society would need to be vegan. It just has to be vegan, because you can't have a utopian ethical society and then also consume the flesh of animals. Like, you can't, those two are not reconcilable. So you can't do that. And of course, this food would also have to be healthy. When you go to one of these public eateries, there will be no huge amounts of sugar. All right, everything is made to be healthy because there is no longer a need to screw over poor people with unhealthy food. Everybody gets the same kind of food. You don't get special food because you're rich. No more of that. None of that. Everybody gets the same. And then, of course, there should be a strong encouragement of exercise. Exercise is difficult. I hate exercise so much. I try to exercise every day, but I really, really struggle with it. It's just something that I find very, very difficult. Some people find it easier. Some people find it harder. Whatever. Now, when you're young, as we've spoken about in, I think also once again, the second or third videos, speaking about the idea of labor, of work versus passion. So like your societal functions and your passions. Now, a lot of societal functions that I've spoken about are kind of manual labor-y. So most people, when they're young, should do those kind of jobs because they're young. Old people should not be forced to continue doing hard labor. It's just, but young people, they can stand to do heavier labor. I could stand to do heavier labor. And also heavier labor will help you stay fit, because you can't exactly become unfit if you are doing kind of intensive work that requires a lot of exercise. You just can't. So that is something that would also be encouraged, that people are essentially, always sort of working, exercising, etc. Now, as I've spoken about many times before, this video has been speaking about fat phobia a lot, but ableism is also very, very important. Obviously, the exercise that is encouraged for somebody with any kind of disabilities will be different to somebody who is fully abled. You cannot expect them to have similar, exercise. And also, you can't expect people with disabilities to do the same kind of labor as somebody who doesn't have a disability. That's just obvious. So that is also something that needs to be taken into account, because that is very important. But yeah, I think that's about it. That's the discussion about all of this stuff. So I have been LC Lupus. You can find me on the social media places at LC_Lupus. If you want to follow me on any for some weird reason. So you can follow me there. You can also check out my first book, Cyborg Wilderness. It's linked below. It is a piece of eco-fiction about a cyborg who was the last survivor of the army that essentially destroyed the world. And now she is on the search for some kind of hope in this dead world. I like the story. It's written in an intentionally stunted style. Maybe you like that as well. Sort of very simple sentences, mostly no commas, no exclamation marks, no dialogue. It's all just it's a very sort of strange way to read. But yes, that is pretty much it. Otherwise, next video will come out next week, obviously, and that one is going to be about decision-making and democracy. So this one's more about like governmental things. So that should be a fun old time. Yeah, that is everything. So I hope that you have a great day, week, and month ahead, and ta-ta!